Members, we will do House Bill 402, Representative Smith. Representative Smith, members, House Bill 402 by Representative Pat Smith.
Good morning, members. A repeat for some of you and new for some of you as well. I'm here to present House Bill 402, which would provide the opportunity for the state of Louisiana to participate fully in the CDC Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey that they do every 2 years. This survey is given by the CDC every 2 years, and it's given randomly, and they randomly select school districts throughout the states that participate. Presently, there are 42 states participating in the survey, and of those 42, 2 southern states, of which Louisiana is one, does not ask the sexual questions on the survey. Our sister state, Mississippi, went to actually had similar results with their youth as we are having in Louisiana, and made a decision to not only do the survey but also are offering comprehensive sex education in the state of Mississippi, along with, I'm sure, other programs that address the issues. But just to give an idea of the CDC survey itself, we've used this survey for many, many reasons. The survey has given us an opportunity to develop policies around students' behavior as a result, as we look at alcohol use, tobacco use, as we look at bicycle riding, for us looking at helmet laws for students, as we look at all of the risks that students take, and being able to come up with some policy to be able to direct good policy for our kids to not be able to have the issues that they have. This is a voluntary survey. It is an opportunity for, and it's for high school students only. Parents have the option to opt out of the survey, and students are not identified at all when they take the survey. When the student gets the survey in their hands, they are given a sheet that says to them, and I will read to you, "Do not write your name on this survey. The answers you give will be kept private. No one will know what you write. Answer the questions based on what you really do. Completing the survey is voluntary. You don't have to answer all the questions. If you feel you're uncomfortable answering a question, leave it blank." So even if the students decide that they're going to take part in the survey, they can skip questions on the survey and not answer them. As one of my fellow members in House Ed said, if they wanted to eat it, they could. They wouldn't have to worry about taking anything on the survey. So the reason that I'm asking that the State Department of Education and this DHH look at this, for 9 years, I've looked at, this is my 9th year, 9 years we've looked at the reasons that we need to have these questions asked. The questions give us an idea of the kinds of risks students are taking, and I'll give you some examples of where we are right now in Louisiana. When we look at teen births, East Baton Rouge Parish ranks number 1, Jefferson Parish number 2, Caddo Parish number 3, Orleans Parish number 4, Calcasieu number 5, Lafayette number 6, Ouachita number 7, Tangipahoa number 8, Rapides number 9, St. Tammany number 10. When we look at the fact that 13-year-olds to 19-year-olds in the state of Louisiana, we rank second in the issues of STDs, STIs, which is second in chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea, and that's children 13 to 19. The ranking for chlamydia in the state of Louisiana, number 1, Madison Parish. Number 2 is Red River Parish. Number 3, Orleans. Number 4, Natchitoches. Number 5, Ouachita. Number 6, Morehouse. Number 7, Richland. Number 8, Caddo. Number 9, Iberia. And number 10 is Lincoln. Gonorrhea. Number 1 is Morehouse. Number 2, Ouachita. Number 3, Orleans. Number 4, Richland. Number 5, Tensas. Number 6, Madison. Number 7, Caddo. Number 8, Red River. Number 9, Iberia. Number 10, Lincoln. Syphilis. Number 1, Orleans. Number 2, Caddo. Number 3, where am I? Number 3 is Ouachita. Number 4, Natchitoches. Number 5, Webster. Number 6, Terrebonne. Number 7, I'm missing my numbers. Number 8 I have is East Baton Rouge Parish. Number 9, I have to find the 7. Number 10 is St. John the Baptist. Number 9, and then HIV. And I'll just tell you, HIV, East Baton Rouge Parish ranks extremely high in HIV amongst all people, but amongst our youth, it's extremely high as well. So what this survey tells us is the risks that youth take. As I said, they're not identified. Their schools are randomly selected. The schools can actually opt out of taking the surveys as well. And folks have said, well, you have the results. Do something about it. I've been trying to do something about it for 9 years, almost. We've been trying to get the Department of Ed and the Department of Health and Hospitals to look at this data. And I think you'll hear from Representative Carmody on what he got as a result of a resolution he passed, asking them to do something about it. We can no longer allow our children to be at risk this way. And all the safeguards are in place for this survey to be totally random, totally not identifying any students, but getting the information that can be nationally placed in this CDC survey to be able to help us to develop policy on what do we do, because undoubtedly no one wants to see sex ed in the schools. That's what you've told me for the past few years when I've tried to pass it. So if you don't want sex ed, what else do we do to stop these kinds of behaviors that our children have? And I'll let the 2 ladies who are with me give you some information as well, who work directly with this.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Senator Milkovich, you have a question for Representative Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Smith, for coming today. I know that we spoke about this, I think, once or twice in the Capitol building. I have a couple of concerns. And one of the things that Senator Walsworth said, of course, you're aware that there was a mirror Senate bill that had the same program. And, of course, I can't imitate Senator Walsworth. I'm not sure anybody can. But when we had the last meeting, he said, you know, why do we need the surveys? We already know what's going on, that there is there's a great problem with premarital sexual activity among our young people. And he said, we got the statistics right. So that was one concern or one thought that we know about the problem. And another concern, and I think I may have spoken to you about this, is that when adults approach children, and we know that in virtually every one of our schools, we have children that are come from broken homes or have very fragile support structures. They don't have a lot of moral guidance. They don't always have a mom or dad or both, or sometimes either, to give them direction. Some of them aren't in church. What is the effect of adults asking them questions about how often do you have sex and how do you perform sex? Does that send a message? Is that confusing to young people? And does that send a message? And I am going to let you answer the questions all at once, but that was a second concern. Is this creating confusion among our young people? And then I think the other thought was, what do we need? Do we need adults asking questions of the kids that say, tell me about your personal life, tell me about, your sex practices, and whether it's in writing or in person or anonymous? Or do we need, and this is for consideration in this education hearing, do we need adults not asking questions, but adults giving answers to young people, saying this is the way to live? Do we need Representative Smiths in the schools? Do we need more parents spending time with these kids? And instead of asking them questions, giving them answers. This is a proper mode of social conduct. This is the consequences of irresponsible behavior. This is the blessed life. This is a way to go nowhere in a hurry. So I think, when we had our conversations, I know it was informal in the Capitol, it's just simply the thought that we do know what the problem. We do know a lot about the problem, and that is that there's a breakdown, a frightening breakdown of moral structures and in the conduct of the young people. And is it possible that the answer isn't asking more questions, but it's adults giving more answers?
Well, I have to ask you this. I'll answer a couple of your current questions first. Why is it needed? There are 42 states that are developing these policies for these issues and are seeing reductions in STIs, teen births across the country. Why do we need it? Because we don't have an idea at all of the risks that are being taken. We know the results of what's happening, but what are the risks that are being taken by these young people? We don't know that. We don't know if if they're having sex with drugs. We don't know if they're having sex with alcohol. We don't know that. All we know is that they're having sex. So whatever we're doing in the state of Louisiana is not working. And the other part of that, you say have people go into the schools. By law, you can't do it.
Well, maybe we need to change the law.
Well,
why can't responsible Christian adults spend more time with our kids?
Well,
if that's the solution, maybe
is that
we
the
need
solution?
Sure. Well, of course.
Well, is that the solution, though? And I'm not going to have a debate on you because we
Absolutely.
cannot legislate morality. You cannot legislate morality, but you can provide information. And the only way to develop policy, in my opinion, is to find out what's happening, what is happening with our kids. This is not a one-on-one interview. It is a survey that is given to the students, just like they've been giving to the students for all the other issues that we've dealt with, asthma, diabetes. All of these things come in conjunction with this survey. We're taking part in it now. We just eliminate a part of the survey, and we're able to develop policies based on it. The State Department of Education can look at the questions. They can work with CDC to change the questions if they choose to. They can choose what questions they want to ask, what questions they don't want to ask. Every safeguard is put in place. But until we get someone to recognize that this is a true problem, the problem is nobody wants to admit that this is a problem with our children. And if they're not
Representative Smith,
admitting it,
everybody knows it's a problem.
but nobody's
And-
doing anything about it.
Well, I disagree.
Nobody's
How
doing
about,
anything about it.
okay, the church is, and the church needs more adults spending time with kids. Kids spell love, Time. And what does that mean? That means adults or parents with children need to be parents to children that don't have parents. That means, and that's a responsibility in everyone in this room that cares about what's happening. We know there's confusion. We know that, absolutely we know kids are using drugs and having sex. We know that they're drinking alcohol and having sex. We know that the parental structure is broken down. Is a survey going to solve this, or is what's the solution that we need a reckoning that the adults need to take ownership and start working more, whether it's the homeless shelters, their churches, and the high schools? I can tell you, for example, Bishop Sean Cooper in Shreveport. He goes into the public school and works with kids that have no parental structure. And he's done a school of greatness. Well, what happens there? You've got a Christian adult that goes into the school and spends time with the kids, and he's seeing great results. He's seeing kids that had no Anyway, I think you.
The
I-
morality of being able to go, have a Christian person go into the school and talk about that is one thing. But is that individual having the in-depth conversations with those children? I don't think so.
He's,
And
if
I
he's
can, and
spending time
every
with them, he
child,
is.
every child that is in our public educational system is not churched. Our parochial schools teach sex ed. If you have children in parochial schools, they get sex ed. They get it. They're teaching it. So we have 700,000 students in the public educational system that get nothing. We have allowed an opportunity for abstinence to be taught. And then we turn around and we don't have the opportunity to even teach the abstinence. So all I can say is that we need to have some means of being able to do policy in the state of Louisiana, or we will continue to see these kinds of results with our children. No one in the public sector is doing anything to help our children.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Senator Milkovich. Senator Mizell, you have a question?
I've got a couple. You and I have talked, and I appreciate your passion, even though I think we're on opposite sides. When I look at the bill on the top of page 2, it says, "A student shall not be tested, quizzed, or surveyed about their personal or family beliefs or practices about sex." How do you have a survey where you find out their sexual behavior if you don't have questions about sex?
Is that present law?
Everything I
It's
see.
present law.
This would allow.
That's present law.
So
What we're trying to do is change that to ask the survey questions.
And have you got a survey that we could see?
You have the survey, but the questions, yes, that's the survey that was given in 13.
This has the results of Louisiana in it.
But it doesn't have any sex questions because we don't ask them at all, period. We ask none.
And what have we done about what we see here as the results already?
On the results of those, the State Department of Education takes those and they look at policy. We have a person that collects the data. All organizations that get it collect data as well dealing with children, and then they look at policy. They recommend policy to the legislators to be able to put in place. As I said, we were able to look at alcohol, drugs, tobacco use, and they continue to ask those questions because we know that students still use some of those social ills. And then they look at what other states are doing to counteract that. You look at the programs that we have for eye care in East Baton Rouge Parish, who puts on prom programs for kids when they go out for prom night and not do, and for drinking and driving. So you've got all of those things that come from that survey that children talk about the risk that they take. And policies have been developed, or organizations have set up programs. We also, by not asking the sex questions, we are not able to dip into the federal dollars that allow you to put programs in place. Not necessarily even in the schools, but even outside of the schools. We can't even get those dollars.
Because last night, I was just curious, because when we talked, you told me about all the other states that are participating. And I just Googled the YRSB in other states, and there would be stories of, sadly, suicides or horrible situations that students had been found in other states. And they would the reference to YRSB would just be the data. It was never a program addressing the issue. It was always just the data that supported what had taken place. And that's a real issue, I find, is that, we have all this data already.
Well,
And I don't see,
Yeah,
I'll let the folks that deal with this,
yeah.
yes.
Good
But
morning.
Ms. Broussard, if you would.
Yeah, Marcia Broussard from Louisiana Public Health Institute, and we actually print, or we take the survey results and we create the report that you have in front of you, which doesn't include the sexual risk behaviors. So how is that information used? It's used quoted by agencies across the state, is quoted by the Department of Health and Hospitals, the Department of Education, to justify the need to do, certain programs to set certain policy. So it's probably likely that there might be references to reports in other states where they don't talk about the interventions, because it's primarily used to show to do surveillance and to show where there are issues. That's the function of the YRBS and other kinds of reports like that. So it's by having this information, then agencies that are interested in HIV prevention services, community agencies, because we can't do much with teen pregnancy prevention in schools, but we can do some things. They have the information to write for a grant to say that in Louisiana, we have an issue here, and therefore we need to put programs in place to address it. So it is a very important tool, an essential tool that states are using all across the country. They have an advantage that we don't have because we don't have this information available to us when people across the country, philanthropic organizations look at it and they're looking at, well, Mississippi has applied for money from the XYZ Foundation, Louisiana applied, but we know what's happening in Mississippi. We don't have any baseline information for Louisiana. So I hope that answers your question.
But in
If
the
I could
parishes-
also make one comment, you talked about suicide. There was a rash of suicides in East Baton Rouge Parish school system. And with the information that was gleaned from the suicides and students taking risk and why the depression and what have you, our Care program started a suicide prevention program within the school system. So there are ways of looking at how you deal with the data and the kinds of programs that you develop to assist kids through some of the issues that they face.
Yeah, there were just multiple suicides in Mandeville and St. Tammany. But the facts are that we had the data of what the kids already think about the suicide.
That data.
Right. So we didn't have to wait for the suicides to happen to respond to what we already knew the kids were thinking about suicides.
Well, in
So if
fact-
you have all the money in the world and you know where the parishes are where we have the highest teen pregnancies, what are we waiting for?
Well, these are very difficult social issues that we're trying to address. And in fact, Louisiana Public Health Institutes and other agencies did go out and work with the people in Mandeville around the suicides. So, yes, it's like an alarm. It says that for Louisiana, if we have this information, it documents that we have a public health issue that we need to deal with. And if we don't have the information, it's sort of glossed over. It's just really important that we participate in surveillance that's occurring across the country. So
But we
can,
already had the information on the suicide. And we know how they
I'm
feel
sorry,
about suicide.
yeah, you were talking
We
about
already-
suicide,
Yeah, we
but-
already knew that.
And yes,
we
there are
still
responses.
respond after the suicides happen. So I appreciate it, but
Well, I'm sorry, Julie, you want to say something? Okay.
Senator Mizell, that concludes
yeah,
your
I'm
questions.
done.
Let's let Senator Boudreau ask a question, and then Ms. Harris will get to you.
More of a comment. I don't know what we're afraid of. I think this is voluntary. Representative Smith.
Totally
thank you.
voluntary.
Thank you for continuing to fight this. All you got to do is look at this handout. Ranked number 1 in the U.S. for primary and secondary syphilis, second in gonorrhea, second in HIV. We can't stop. The Department of Education, you answered it earlier. Once we get the data and once we get it, we work with these agencies, we work with the department to come back. We just had a bill on tobacco use in schools that just passed through. We're not going to be able to solve all the answers,
Right.
and we can't prevent all of the problems, but we cannot. I mean, if Senator Milkovich talked about having the adults do it. If you had it in your bill to have the adults come, they would object to the fact that you have adults telling kids. This is voluntary. I don't know what we're afraid of. I don't know how much higher we have to get on the list. How many more do we have to lose before we keep running behind all of these walls saying we can't do this? If the parents don't want their child to fill out, they don't have to.
Correct.
But for those that do, and the resolution that was passed previously allowed for the same thing. We got to move forward with some of these educational issues and quit finding reasons why we can't support things to make it better for everybody. And I'm not afraid to say we have problems in my parish, and I know we're not going to be able to solve them all.
Sure.
But if we don't stop hiding behind these walls, every time something comes up where we have a mechanism in place to make it better, we're going to go further the other way. So I'm going to support it, and I hope we can get it out of committee and get it on the floor and get all of the groups, all of the religious groups, everybody on board to understand. This is not mandatory. We're not asking people to do something that they don't feel comfortable in doing.
Correct. And when you look at the cases, Senator Boudreaux, it's reported cases.
That's correct.
We don't know the number of children who are walking around with these diseases and don't even know they have them.
Exactly. And another point that I wanted to make as it relates to the bill, the current law right now allows for some of this that's in current law right now. Okay, we're trying to close the gap by adding these other the sexual related questions in to have that conversation. But I don't want the adults to do it. I want it to do exactly how your bill has it. Make it voluntary. And I think we need to move forward with this. And those who don't want to fill out, they don't have to. But I'm tired of every time something comes up where we're trying to make some progress, we got issues with it. If this thing was mandatory, I would be against it. It's voluntary. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Senator Boudreaux. Ms. Ms. Harris has been replaced by Representative Carmody.
Thank you.
Representative Carmody, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Senators, just so that you kind of understand, I was appointed to serve on House Ed, and that was when we came in together in 2008. You're looking at someone that never had public education until they attended LSU. So I was the benefit of parents who sent me to Catholic school. I also received the benefit of sex education there. But every time that we talked about sex education in the state, there were persons that came to the table that said, this should be taught at home. This is a parent's responsibility to do this, and we should not be involved as elected officials in doing this. I understand that. I agree with you. I don't know why people don't do it, other than it is an uncomfortable conversation. Now, can you imagine? Every one of us came into this world the same way. That's the reality of how God made it possible for human beings to reproduce one another. And the point of my being here to support this bill is this. Out of frustration, and Representative Smith read the statistics off, Caddo Parish unfortunately holds a lot of those high numbers for STDs, teen pregnancies, and everything else. As a result of that, I thought, okay, well, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to find out, since we're an abstinence-only education program in the state, they've got to be teaching it more effectively in other jurisdictions besides Caddo. Let's find out where they're teaching this so that we can kind of replicate that. And so I passed last year a House resolution asking the Department of Education, as well as the Department of Health and Hospitals, to take a look. Where is it the most effective where they're doing it? If you'll bear with me, let me read to you at least the summary of the report. It says, a plan of action to increase the effectiveness of the sex education curriculum used within this state, including the policies and the administrative changes that could be implemented immediately, as well as a recommendation for necessary legislation. That was the fifth point in the summary. And this is the response. Health education standards for schools are broad enough to allow flexibility according to the strengths or challenges identified within each community, and also allow the flexibility of teaching sex education. As a result, the sex education curriculum will vary based upon the needs of the individual schools and communities. Here's the kicker. Studying and evaluating the effectiveness of sex education curricula used in public schools will require more in-depth research by independent consultants, both at the state level and within the local school systems. In order to conduct such studies, researchers and other evaluators will need greater access to students' self-reported data. This is currently extremely difficult, as the surveying of students about their belief in sexual practices is currently prohibited. We can't even ask them this. Research data could allow for further policy development and administrative decision-making at the state and local levels. This might be my misunderstanding in almost 20 years in public office, but at least I was brought up to believe that the first rule of the law should be public safety. Why else have laws? it should be to assure that we're trying to make sure that the people that we represent, our constituents, are kept as safe as they could be kept. It's heartbreaking, as those of you who've served on education before understand. The precursor to a child not finishing high school is them getting into a situation they did not intend as a result of their behavior, and specifically young women that find themselves pregnant. And when you look at what happens in that case, the possibility of them seeking a high school diploma is almost nil. The idea of them continuing their education to try to finish college and be more productive citizens, their priorities change, just like any of us that have become parents understand. It used to be about us. Hopefully we find a partner that they become our priority. If we're blessed enough that our partner and I have a child, that then becomes our joint responsibility and priority. I'm here today in support of House Bill 402, and I would ask the senators to consider the fact that we are trying to increase public safety for these children without the information that DOE and the Department of Health and Hospitals have said that they need to have in order to do so. I think we're going to continue to see Louisiana rank high in the bad consequences of behavior that these children don't understand that they're participating in. And I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Carmody, and we do have some. Senator Walsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hear all the stuff, and I don't think we're doing what we should be doing. I agree. Teacher gets 2 years for sex with students. 3 students. Male teacher. The victims, 3 victims. One of them's pregnant. One of them has a child. He gets 2 years. We're not doing what we ought to do. It's an opt-out survey. It's not an opt-in survey. So it's not totally voluntary. You're hoping that the parent will get the message back home and we have to opt out. It is opting out on page 2. It's opting out.
That's correct.
The student may be excused from completing the survey on a request by the parent. That's opting out. Why not have them opt in? We don't have them opt in. Do we really believe that the kid in Mississippi is doing anything different than the kid in Louisiana is? And I do have one thing that you're saying that no one is doing anything about. The private sector is not doing anything about that. I've got nonprofits daily that are trying to do something about this back in Washita Parish daily. And to say that no one is doing anything back home at all, and that we have to have this sex survey for anybody to do anything is just absolutely not true.
Can I respond?
Churches, nonprofits are doing this daily back home. Now, are we a different society? We're a different society than we were 20 years ago. Let's all believe that. And it's not, and we think this survey is going to be the magic one that does, well, we already know what's going on. We already know that we ought to be parents talking to our kids. We already know those things. And to sit here and say that a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old should take this survey, I just don't have I have a problem with that.
It is not for,
You don't have an
high
age.
school.
You don't
it's for
have
high school only.
You don't have an age down here.
It's for high school only.
But a 13-year-old can be in high school. They absolutely can, Senator.
Yes.
They absolutely can.
Thanks
So
for elevating me, but I'm not a senator yet.
Well, Representative.
Not yet.
But you can, but absolutely a 13-year-old girl could be, or boy could be in high school. Absolutely. So, I mean, that's the other problem I've got. Yeah, I've got a 19-year-old that's probably in the high school, and he's taking that survey. And I've got a 13-year-old. Now, hopefully there is a difference between the two. But are you going to separate them by age, or are you going to separate, how do you, I mean, on this survey, there's so many questions out there. But to say that we can't do anything because we don't have the information is just absolutely wrong. We have the information. We as parents know what we ought to do. We as churchgoers know what we ought to be doing. And to say that we have to wait for a sex survey to sit here and tell us what we're doing, I agree. If we look through here, we've got some things that we're being told here, and our rates are still going up high.
As it relates to opt-in and opt-out, I just wanted to make the point that right now it is opt-in. Opt-out, opt-out.
It's an opt-out.
Opt-in can be from as far as doing the survey is concerned, and then having every parent to have to agree to do it. It might be very difficult to get the sample size, and then the survey would not be meaningful. The data would not be statistically significant.
So I need.
From the point of view of-
Okay,
yeah,
so
just-
you're telling
yeah.
me I need the opt-out.
I think it would make it easier to administer. I'm not saying that it's absolutely necessary. It's just that it would make it a lot more difficult if it were opt-in. And I also wanted to make the point with respect to community organizations. Yes, there are community organizations that are really trying. And I know we're getting into the weeds around surveillance versus actual programming and what you do with the information. But I will say that with community organizations, you're only touching a few kids. It's really hard to reach the numbers with community groups. It might be 10 kids in a group, but we have thousands of kids in our state, many of whom are at risk, and eventually they need access to programming that's going to reach them as well. So that's why, schools
how do you-
offer a better alternative. Even in terms of abstinence education, we're reaching many more kids across the state than if we were doing it with a few kids that are attracted and can be served by community-based programs. So this is when you have a public health problem, such as we have with STIs, HIV, unplanned pregnancies among young people, failure to graduate, failure to finish school, we need to be thinking in terms of public health approaches and solutions. One approach is surveillance. We have to understand from a national perspective. They need to look at our data and look at Mississippi's data and say that Louisiana has a problem. They need more resources in order to address this issue from a public health perspective. And I'm not talking about a few kids. We are our rates are kind of, they're off the chain, in young person's vernacular. So we have reason to be concerned, and we have to come up with solutions. The surveillance is just one part of it. It's not a solution. Yes, we already know the outcomes. It's just another tool in our toolbox when people are looking at us and saying, should we invest in them? Well, yeah, they've got a serious problem. They're at least willing to have data that we can compare to what's going on in other states to try to address it. So that's why the survey is important. No, it's not going to solve the problem. It's just another tool in our toolbox.
Go ahead, Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. You haven't had a chance. You have more questions, Mr. Walsworth?
Wait.
You certainly, Ms. Harris, if you will, go ahead and make
Yes,
your
and I'm going to
comments.
try to be very quick. I'm Julie Schwam Harris, and I'm not a professional, but I am an advocate, and I've studied these issues and worked with professionals in the public health field. One of the things we want to come back to, because this is not a bill about sex education or abstinence education or any kind of actual implementation of the kinds of programs that are needed, whether they be faith-based, whether they be, otherwise. This is really about one step, one tool, and it's a small, but it's a big step. It's obviously got a lot of controversy around it, but it's a very laser-like thing. How do we do a better job of objectively, and by objectively I'm meaning to the outside world, to the United States and to the public health world, how do we objectively measure the types of behaviors that lead to the awful income? So it's outcomes, it's behaviors and outcomes. And for example, one of the outcomes is that teen births have gone down in Louisiana, but they've gone down much more in other states. And while we have births that have gone down in Louisiana, although much more slowly than in other states, we have had a rise, and we have terrible outcomes in the sexually transmitted diseases. So some of what the data that this survey, given voluntarily, and hopefully in a way that no person, no high school child would take, that would upset that child, that high school child, young person, would have all the options to get out. That data would help us parse and figure out what's going on and how do we attack that. I have been told that we would even have access to more abstinence funding for programs if we could have this baseline data, because some, not all, some of the federal money for programs that could be brought back into schools if the school wants it, and the school can choose to apply for it, or the system can choose to apply for it, would be more available even for abstinence as well as abstinence and perhaps comprehensive if we had the baseline data. She used the word tool, and I wanted to use the word, and I wanted to point out that the schools already have mandates that the legislature in its wisdom has seen to put on, mandates that ask it to prevent child assault, which is child abuse, child sexual abuse. The schools have mandates to try to prevent child assault. The schools, public schools, have mandates to try to prevent dating violence. And all these bad outcomes, dating violence, child assault, part of the data we would need to develop those programs would be in this type of survey, these types of questions that are done randomly throughout the state and in other states. Last point is that the Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault wrote each of you a letter. They are one of the key nonprofits that are working, because there are lots of them working. I think in her frustration, she's like, nobody's doing anything. People are doing things, she's doing stuff, the state is doing things, but maybe not enough. Obviously, we aren't doing enough to prevent those suicides. And St. Tammany Parish, not this year, I think last year, had the highest number of suicides of all people. I don't know what the number was in adults. No. And just because you have the data doesn't mean you've taken the steps to actually do what is needed to prevent it. But if you don't start with data in this world that requires accountability, then you haven't even taken the first step. So LaFossa has asked you to support this bill. The Louisiana Foundation Against Sexual Assault has asked you to support this bill because it would help them not only with their policy development, it would help them in their applications for funding to prevent sexual assault. And though I have not heard the domestic violence groups weigh in, I know that the dating violence issue that is unfortunately high in our state would also benefit from the access to data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Senator Milkovich had a question for Representative Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Carmody, thank you so much
Yes,
for
sir.
coming back.
Yes, sir.
You know, I tried to listen carefully to your testimony. You said, well, let's get more information, and then let's do policy development. And this is my question, because obviously you're concerned. Obviously Representative Smith is concerned. These young ladies are concerned. Y'all wouldn't be here if you weren't concerned. But my question is policy development. What is more effective as a policy development than adults with Christian morality, maturity, and character spending time with kids?
There's nothing, and guess what?
Okay, we agreed on something.
You're looking at somebody that was blessed to have two people that fit that bill to a T, right? And because I was the beneficiary of that type of attention and that type of caring and that type of love, I avoided a lot.
You turned out fantastic.
No, I wouldn't say I am perfect, but I aspire to.
I said fantastic,
Because
yes.
my parents had said, we have expectations of you. You are loved. You are cared for. Okay? There are a lot of these kids out here that don't have that same benefit.
Okay, well then let's take it one step further. Whose job is it, and what's going to fix it? And I think you're agreeing with me, the best policy solution for kids being lonely and forlorn and despairing and self-destructive and antisocial and immoral and crazy is quality adults spending time with them. Well, isn't that the same solution even for kids that don't have parents? In other words, it's you.
If I could
you
pass a
probably
law
coach.
to require it, Senator, I think that you would vote with me to do that, wouldn't you?
Well, and I guess what I'm saying is the solution always one more government program? When is the solution us, the people in this room, every single one of us making it a priority to mentor kids, spend time with kids?
That is my priority. I advocate for the same thing that you're talking about, but I also come back to the fact that we're talking about trying to look at public safety and doing it through the law to try to make sure that these children understand. And when I say children, they're young adults at that point. But this device right here can educate anybody about how to procreate, right? And it's unfortunate that you think that the technology that a lot of these kids, they're not getting it from their parents because it's an uncomfortable conversation for their parents to have. And I used this example years ago. I'm one of 13 children, right? And when I became, I guess, a fifth grader, I had mentioned to my parents, hey, we're supposed to go into health and hygiene, and I just wanted to talk to you about what are we going to be studying? And my parents said, well, Thomas, we'll get you a book. I'm 55 years old. I've never seen that book, okay? Because it is that kind of a difficult conversation to have. But you're asking a question about where should this come from? It should come from your parents first. And it's just, as I say, it's amazing to me that we would put a stigma on something that is basically God's plan for those people, in my opinion, that love and care for one another. However, human beings have a tendency to go outside of those parameters. And when they do, sometimes there are unintended consequences that affect all of us. And when I mean all of us, I'm talking about the taxpayers of this state. And so that is the point of why I'm here trying to advocate for this. The more information that we have and the ability to try to communicate that information to our citizens, the better educated our population is, and hopefully the safer they are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Carmody.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank you,
coming
Senator.
back, Senator Carmody. Senator Pell, did you have a question for Representative Carmody?
Just,
No, sir, other than we're on the floor, and I'm trying to help out
On the floor here, too.
my chairman of appropriations.
You're trying to help this lady.
I'm always trying to help.
And this could be either, you know, it's funny because you usurp something. How many kids you think have one of these? In school, percentage of kids in school, in high school, where we're talking
Senator
about?
Pell, let me give you a quick story. My daughter Rose, who's now 13, asked when she was 8 years old for a smartphone, and her mother and I said, Rose, you know, you're not old enough to really do this, and so we got her a smartphone at 10. And when she got it, she was so excited, and she said, Daddy, when did Mama and Daddy Dear get you your first cell phone? And I said, they did not. I was 34 years old. And she said, well, why did you wait so long? Because there was no such thing. But she doesn't understand that. How many children have it? You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed. All of them.
All of them.
All of them.
And how many do you suppose have limitations on what they can see on these things? You guess.
I know there are parental controls that can be installed. Probably a very minute number of those.
Number.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, between the music they're listening to,
Right.
the trash that comes across these things, the trash that's in the theaters.
Your television. Think about the commercials that are now
Television.
being aired that draw questions from a child as to,
So
what does this product do? That's an
I understand.
uncomfortable conversation.
You're talking about just the advertising.
I'm talking advertising.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, my point, I guess, is they're being bombarded
Yes, sir.
with this stuff.
Right.
And yet we seem to want to bury our head in the sands and not even find out where we're going.
Right.
I mean, I'm reading this book and I'm looking at the trend lines, and it's pretty clear that Louisiana more or less follows the national trends on obesity, smoking, teaching about HIV, AIDS, suicide, which is one that's particularly disturbing to me.
And do you mind me interjecting at that point? For those of you who were not here in 2008, the first bill that I carried and passed was the Jason Flatt Act. And for those senators that were not here, I do want to just kind of go over it. It was to mandate that teachers have in-service every year to recognize when a child is in distress. Why? Because if you see something that's wrong, or a child that appears to be struggling, sometimes all it takes is somebody reaching out to that child to let them know, again, they're cared for, to keep them from doing something that,
Who you know, I'm sitting, kids who wear or don't wear seatbelts. Who teaches them the importance of wearing seatbelts in the most?
their parents. Hopefully.
Well,
Either that
I
or it's
would
going to be the law
suggest it's not
enforcement
their
officer.
parents.
The law enforcement
Yes,
officer.
it's their driving ed teacher.
Oh, that's
That's what I
correct.
would suggest. And then.
But as a good parent, you told your children to restrain
Oh,
themselves.
And we did.
Yes.
And we do. But,
Right.
but as you point out, you know, not everybody's a good parent.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, because of the results of these kind of surveys, we recognize that there is a breakdown in parenting. Now, if we're just going to continue to bury our heads in the sands, this piece of paper, more than anything else, set me off. We're number 1 in syphilis, number 2 in chlamydia, number 2 in gonorrhea, and number 2 in HIV amongst, these are kids.
I hang my head
This isn't
thinking about that.
grown-ups. This is kids.
Children. Yes, sir.
And yet we're sitting here having this debate about whether we should even inquire about the nature of where these kind of diseases come from. I mean, we got to wake up and face the music that they got these phones. They know everything. And we're not going to reverse and go back to we had a lady here about libraries a couple hours ago. I hate to tell you, we're not going back to the days of books in libraries. Those days are gone.
Right.
It's all on these devices. And as long as these kids get all this information or misinformation or garbage, as I like to call it,
Or misinterpret the information they're receiving.
misinterpreted information
Correct.
because they're so young they don't know how to interpret it in the real world,
Right.
they're just going to keep doing what they think is cool. And what they think is cool comes across this. And as long as we as grown-ups just say, okay, well, we're just going to let them go, and we're going to teach them abstinence. So we got maybe somebody saying something about abstinence in school, and they're bombarded with sex, raunchy sex, on these devices all day long. And what do you think they believe? So, guys, I mean, to me,
My last comment is this.
please do. And then go back to the floor.
I will go back to the floor. But the weakest argument that I've heard since I've been in Baton Rouge is by those that say, if you discuss the subject matter, you tweak the curiosity of these children to start to investigate that. That's not how it happens. The brain, through the chemicals of puberty, tweak the human.
That's right.
That's what happens. And granted, with all the different information that they are bombarded with outside of the school classroom, you kind of understand that that's a pretty weak argument that if you talk about sex or you talk about risky behavior, that it's going to whet their appetites to find out about it. I'm sorry, I just think that's not a very valid argument. Thank y'all for letting me come back and testify. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carmody.
Thank you, Representative.
I have one other card in support who would like to speak, Claire Stagg.
And while that individual is coming, I'd like to also make a comment. The number one reason for dropouts for young girls is teen pregnancy.
Right.
And yet, our schools don't even report teen pregnancies to the State Department of Education. They don't even take count on it. The only way they know is that the child's gone and they end up in a doctor's office and they're pregnant. We don't even take trend data on the number of kids that are coming to school by Department of Education on who's pregnant and who's not.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Ms. Stagg is representing herself. Ms. Stagg.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak today. I'm a Baton Rouge resident and an LSU student. I've always gone to Louisiana public schools. I'm here speaking in support of HB 402 today because while surveying students about sexual risk behaviors may seem controversial to the legislature, it's simply just not to students. For our state students, this issue really couldn't be more clear. Collecting this data gathered by YRBS is a common sense first step towards implementing effective and cost-efficient initiatives aimed at improving our state's troubling health outcomes. You guys are right to say that parents should be talking to their kids about these issues, but the simple reality is, speaking from my own experience, they just don't. And I wish I could remember the gentleman's name that was sitting in the seat before me, but he was right. We learn from the media. We learn from pornography a lot of the time, and that's not any more healthy. So this is incredibly important because this action being proposed here today is not unusual or extraordinary. Of the 42 states that participate in this survey, we're one of 2 southern states that don't include the sexual risk questions. And because of this, this leaves us without a clear indication of how Louisiana's students comply with national trends or which action should be taken to improve health outcomes in the state. YRBS is completely anonymous, it's non-invasive, it's entirely voluntary. No student is required to participate. However, in the addition of these questions in other states have proven to be really unproblematic among the public. Kids have the maturity level that's needed to be asked and respond to these questions in a way that's responsible. By high school, it's not icky or controversial to us anymore. We understand the reality of this being part of everyone's everyday life, and this is a really simple and common sense first step to starting to address the really dismal outcomes that we have. You're right, we do have the information on our sexual health outcomes, but what we don't have is information regarding what behaviors attribute to that, what behaviors make it more likely that kids may have sexual health problems. So I just ask that the committee supports this bill today as a common sense first step to moving Louisiana towards better public health outcomes and providing students and all Louisiana residents with the resources we need and deserve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Stagg. We appreciate it. Members, we have green cards in support who do not wish to speak. Jim Harris and Jenny Martinez with the Louisiana State Medical Society, Jennifer Marusak with the Louisiana State Medical Society, Michael Myers with Red River United, Megan Spell with the HIV/AIDS Alliance for Region 2, Inc., and Melanie Powers, who represents herself. Mr. Collins, I have Mr. Eugene Collins. Mr. Collins, I have actually two cards for you, one in support and one a white card. If you would explain when you get down. And Kendra Lasar from the Louisiana Public Health Institute would like to speak, but it is a white card for information purposes only. Mr. Collins.
Sure. Thank you, and good evening at this point. You know, when we think about this House bill and information, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Director of Prevention at the HIV Alliance for Region 2. In addition to that, I'm a minister of the gospel and also a parent. And I come to you today to tell you, Representative Smith explained the stats, that in our region we rank #1 per capita in AIDS-related cases. We rank #1 per capita in HIV-related cases. In addition to that, of those cases, 25% of those are young people aged 13 to 24. The largest percentage of young people our state has ever seen infected. So when we look at that, there has to be legislation at this point on some level, because if not, we're going to come back year after year and hear 27%. Year after that, maybe 28. Then statistically, we're going to look at 30%. And at some point, this is going to be taken out of your hands because this is going to be a national state of health emergency. Do we really want to let it get there? Our young people are dying. The youngest person I ever counseled that I had to tell that they were HIV positive was 13 years of age in a church. And I remember asking this young lady, is there one person in this church that you trust that I can talk to help you get to service? And she said no. We don't have an open line of communication with our youth because we are, as adults, as educated adults, are afraid to have this conversation with them. So, Senators, today I'm here begging you because I don't want to sit down with another 13-year-old kid and tell them that they're positive, that we have to do something. And this survey, it's not everything we need, but it's a step in the right direction. It's a step in the right way. And if you don't believe that, I invite you to my office to sit down in front of these kids and tell them why you don't. We have to do something to reach our youth. We are losing our kids, and we're choosing to put our hands under our butts and not do anything. In addition to that, we claim to be the buckle of the Bible Belt, but look at the stats, guys. We're removing that buckle way too much across all ages. So if our adults are removing that buckle way too much, how can they educate their kids? And I'm going to tell you, of all the kids I've educated, of all the kids I've talked to, the hardest one to reach is the 13-year-old who lives in my back bedroom. It's a tough conversation to have with him. I can have this conversation all day with other kids, but talking to him, it's a little tougher. Our parents need help. And this survey is the first step to providing that help.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'm going to take that as a green card. Ms. Lassar.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Kendra Lassar. I'm a public health professional. Throughout my 10-year career, I've worked at the Centers for Disease Control in the division that develops questions for the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. I worked at a public high school in Louisiana that participated in the YRBS, and I currently work at the Louisiana Public Health Institute, which in the past has been contracted by the Department of Education to create the reports about the YRBS. So I have a lot of understanding of the development, implementation, and reporting of this survey. And so I just wanted to talk to you all a little bit about how these surveys work and make sure that everyone understands that it's completely voluntary. Every school district has the autonomy to decide whether they participate or not. Parents have the ability to excuse their students from participating. Students have the ability to choose not to participate at all or to not answer certain questions. And their data is always kept private and confidential, and that is considered to be very important. There is no evidence that surveying students about sexual risk behaviors causes any sort of desensitization or puts students in any risk. And the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and other surveys like it are data collection tools, and the results can inform program development and future policy decisions, but they don't guarantee that that will happen, but they provide that first step of information that allows those programs to be developed. Ms. Harris mentioned that there has been a decrease in teen pregnancy rates in Louisiana, which there has. From 1991 to 2013, the teen pregnancy, or the teen birth rate, I should say, decreased 48%, which is excellent news. We're still very high compared to the rest of the country, but it has decreased. The issue is that we don't know why this rate has decreased. Has it decreased because more students are choosing to be abstinent, or has it decreased because students are choosing to use contraception when they become sexually active? And so although we know the outcome data, without having data on the behaviors that inform that, we don't have a complete picture that can help those prevention programs be developed. So I just wanted to share that with you all today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Senator Walsworth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two, and two questions. One, when the student is filling out the survey, what percentage of students skip different questions?
I don't.
Is that rare, or is that just normal for 20 or 30% to skip questions?
I don't have that percentage in front of me, and I don't want to give you the wrong number.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's relatively rare.
Okay. And lastly, in the, 40 other states that have this survey, how come teenage pregnancy went down in those states?
It's been a mix. They have seen some students who are it's mostly been through an increase in contraception use.
Okay.
But we also know that there is also a 16% increase in the number of high school students who are choosing to remain abstinent through high school. So.
Okay. Do you think that's any different in Louisiana? Is any different than any other state?
It's really hard to say because we just don't have the data.
And you have to have the data before you'll know?
Yeah,
You think so?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lassar. Appreciate it. Members, that concludes those supporters of the bill. I do have cards in opposition who wish to speak. Christy Cross, Education Resource Council. Dr. Elizabeth Myers, representing herself, and Sarah Wood, representing herself, if those three individuals will come to the table. Thank you for being here today. And we'll start on the left. Identify yourself, ma'am. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Beth Myers. I'm here to speak in opposition to the bill. I'd like to say, first of all, I worked in the public school for 20 years before I retired. I'm well aware of the problems that are in schools. I faced them myself. I saw them with the girls, unfortunately, who made decisions and had to live with those decisions. And I absolutely appreciate the passion that Representative Smith has for this, intending to address an area, an issue that is obviously a problem in our communities. However, one of the things I'd like to bring to the table is the data. There's an explosion in technology in our country that if we don't, we're going to lose a lot of our privacy. And we are also not, looking at the unintended consequences of gathering that data. For example, there's something called medical GIS, which is used by our state and is used by the CDC and is used by the federal level DOE. And what a GIS means is that they will gather the data and then they will load it into a map. And that map will then identify areas. So while what you're doing is essentially you're gathering this data, and then you're marking on the map particular areas where this data fits. Then what you might do is actually cause communities to lose investment if that's what your intention is. For example, if on those GIS you have a mapping of AIDS in a particular community, it will affect, because GIS is used in real estate, GIS is used in multiple ways, so that you might actually tag a community as being high in AIDS, and then possibly bringing down unintended consequences on that particular community. So while I understand that we need data, I'm a data person. I worked in the US DOE as a data researcher, so I get it. But there are also unintended consequences we need to think about before we pass bills, unpackaging it, if you will. Another area that you need to understand is that under the Affordable Care Act and under other bills that are coming down at the federal level, you have the CETRA bill. The CETRA bill is going to allow for a lot of surveying of students through the it's Senate Bill 227, which will allow them to ask questions about social emotional learning. Social emotional learning will include mental health. We also have school-based health centers which are asking about mental health, and in which one of our districts in our state bragged about getting around the privacy law. Again, I have all the documents if you would like to see it, where they are allowing health professionals to get into education records. And someone will say, well, that's against FERPA. No. FERPA and HIPAA have problems. There's kind of a hole, if you will, between those two laws protecting privacy. So there's a lot of things that we need to consider, and repackaging of data. And then there's also an MIT study as well as several other university studies that have shown that even though it's anonymous, they have been able to use multiple data points to re-identify people, even though they de-identify them in certain ways. So again, just be careful when you pass these bills without thinking about the unintended consequences of what they might do to the individual, to the family, or to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Myers. Ms. Cross?
Cross, yes. I'm Christy Cross. And first, I'd like to start by saying that I believe everyone here has the same goal at heart. We know there's a problem, and we want to help our kids, and we want to do something to alleviate the problem. Unfortunately, this bill is not the answer to that. We don't need more data. We don't need to ask more questions. We need the policies to be put in place, but we know the answer to the questions. It doesn't matter if it's drug-related or alcohol-related. The only way that you're going to get an STD or a teenage pregnancy is if these teenagers are engaging in sexual behavior. So these surveys seem to be a way to, the comment was made that we need to get the grant money. Well, getting more grant money and more consultants and more studies done is only going to delay finding the answer to the problem. And I'd like to direct you in the bill and under existing law that there is sex education in the schools. The kids are being able to be taught factual information, factual biological or pathological information that's related to the human reproductive system and may include the study of sexually transmitted disease, pregnancy, childbirth, puberty, menstruation, and menopause, as well as the dissemination of factual information about parental responsibilities under the child support laws of the state. That information can be given. That's factual information that these kids need to know. And if they're given this information, I think the main problem we have is that they're not listening to us. They're not listening to the facts. I think everyone remembers when you're a teenager, you're bulletproof, you're invincible. Even if they're given the facts, even if they're given the risk, they don't think it's going to happen to them. So what's the way that we're going to combat this problem? Well, first of all, maybe we should ask them what they're watching on TV. What are they viewing on their cell phones? How many episodes of The Kardashians have they seen this week? We'll all agree, I think on all sides of this issues, we'll agree that we're in a culture war and we're losing. And we're all on the same side. Even though we disagree on maybe some of the finer points of how we want to combat this, I think that we can all agree that we need to strengthen our families, we need to strengthen the parent-child relationship, we need to strengthen the community organizations, the church organizations, the mentorship programs that will deal with these children individually. This is an anonymous survey. This is a voluntary survey. The parents can opt out, opt in. So what that tells us is that there's not going to be any individual attention given to the kids who might be walking around with the undiagnosed pregnancy or the undiagnosed STD. How are we going to get to those individual results that we're looking for? We've got to get to the hearts of these individual kids, and this survey simply isn't the way to do it. And I had a speech prepared. That's just kind of me talking in response to some of the things that we've heard here today. But I would just ask you all to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wood.
Sarah Wood, St. Tammany Parish. I oppose this bill. Of course, Senator Appel is right. Kids get smut from everywhere. So I think he might, as well as you all might understand, that this is really about government action. You know, the statement, where does it stop? The statement was made that this is for public safety. Well, that's a slippery slope that we're watching creates an avalanche of government authority. And I understand we're talking about one survey that's voluntary with an opt-out, but, you know, public safety has constitutional boundaries, even in this state. And in this case, it's called the right to privacy. You know, government, and public schools are government actors, has no business asking these questions. And to do so voluntarily or not creates a numbing effect. It numbs these children to the fact that government has no business invading his or her privacy by asking such intimate questions. And that is a problem. That is a problem that leads to a generation that will pose less of a problem to what's going on here, the creation of an all-consuming government under this excuse or that excuse. You know, I realize I don't view this from a socialist perspective. I understand that. And as a socialist, you could make the argument for just about government involvement in everything. You know, this survey, getting back to the fact, this survey will not do anything to stop the sex and drugs. We already have the data. We know what is going on. This is unfortunately taking place. Why? Well, the fact that nobody wants to talk about is we are reaping what was sown legislatively, what was sown when we removed God from schools. That's the fact that nobody wants to talk about. Are these all these voluntary surveys do? In reality, let's talk about where we're going to go with this, is provide legislative justification for more freedom-taking policies, period. And you know what else they'll justify? It justifies our state trading federalism for federal dollars so that special interests can create more nonprofit, non-governmental organizations to take taxpayer dollars to act like it's going to solve a problem that it will not. Representative Smith is right. We cannot legislate morality, but we're doing a good job legislating immorality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Members, we have other folks who would like to speak. Thank y'all for being at the table. I'm sorry. Senator Appel, you have a question for Ms. Wood?
I just
still
wanted
here.
to. Hi.
I said I'm still here, so I'll take
I
it.
just wanted to say that.
For Ms. Myers or Ms. Wood?
No, Ms. Cross.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that she has done a spectacular job with her daughter, Kristen, who is my legislative assistant. And I have been sworn by Kristen to keep her out of this conversation. And,
You're not doing a good job.
and she left.
Yes,
She
she's
said
gone.
I asked her to come here because she said you were coming and we were going to be on opposite sides. So she left.
She left.
She's smart. Anyway, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ms.
Appreciate you too. Thank you.
Angela, is it Alex? Aleph. I'm sorry. It is an F. The People, I'm sorry, you. The People LLC, I'm sorry. Dr. Will Hall, Louisiana Baptist Office of Public Affairs, and Teresa Robert, representing herself. Ms. Aleph, thank you.
Thank you for hearing my testimony. I know that Representative Smith reported rankings, and I went to the CDC's report on the state of health in Louisiana from 2011 to 2014. And what I found was in all of the areas spoken about today that are of concern, the incidences of these problems have decreased. So without the surveying and the violation of students' right to privacy, and without government intervention, these situations have been improving steadily since 2011. Now, anyone can access those reports, but the percentage is not just across the board for the population of our state. Those percentages also have decreased steadily for those same years for children aged 15 to 19. So there's different ways, as we all know, to report data. And I believe looking at the percentage of increase or decrease of these incidences is much more valuable and useful to the committee. As far as the law, Act 837 seems to be a problem, although the entire legislature unanimously passed it, and passed it because, as it states in the law, the right to privacy is fundamental for all citizens, and that would include children. And all of you legislators agreed that we're here, so I know I'm not telling you anything that you don't understand or believe. But the protections in this law are being either misinterpreted or overlooked, because the violation, which triggers criminal penalties, is not in if information is actually gathered, from children. The violation is in anyone who is an official or an employee requiring the collection. The violation is the requiring of that collection. So when anyone sits here and says schools can decide to do it or to not do it, Act 837 says no, they cannot decide to do it. Another thing that's very important where this law is concerned is sexual behavior or attitudes aside. This survey is almost 100% in violation of Act 837. If you look at the law, passed unanimously and signed by the governor, mental or psychological problems of the student or student's family cannot be asked of children in the state of Louisiana. Illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, or demeaning behavior, questions related to that cannot be asked of children in the state of Louisiana. Critical appraisals of other individuals with whom a student has a family relationship cannot be asked of children in our state. Legally recognized privilege or analogous relationships, which would include with physicians, cannot be asked here of children. Gun ownership questions cannot be asked of children in the state of Louisiana. Questions related to all of the things I just named are in this survey. So I just hope that no one is subject to violations, to penalties under this act, because I sure hope no one has decided at the school level or the state level to ask children these questions since 2014. Now, that's information that I believe has been being overlooked. And I would really appreciate you considering, of course. It's the requiring of the collection, whether anybody decides to give the information or not. This information cannot be required to be collected by any official or employee in the school system. The other thing that keeps getting overlooked in the law, and this is the last thing that I'll bring up, and I appreciate your patience, is that it doesn't say children can't be asked these questions unless there's an opt-in or an opt-out. It doesn't say they can be asked these questions only if it's presented voluntarily. It says they can't be asked these questions, and anyone who wants this information from children has to go speak to their parent and get it from the parent if the parent chooses to voluntarily disclose it. I didn't pass that legislation. You guys did. And we were extremely proud of the stance Louisiana took. And we have always said at the People LLC that Louisiana is the state who can lead the other states out of the mess that this country's in. And I believe you guys led when you passed the Student Data Privacy Act, which is, despite the changes made last session, it still is the strongest student data privacy law in the nation, well surpassing any protections that FERPA used to or currently provides. We did that. Louisiana did that. And I don't choose to follow the other states. I choose to lead them, and I ask you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leaf. Appreciate your testimony. Ms. Robert.
No.
Ladies first. Dr. Hall,
And I won't be
ladies
long.
first.
My name is Teresa Robert. I am just an ordinary citizen, a wife, a mother, grandmother. I was a teacher in my earlier years. And all I know about this bill is what I've heard today when I've come in here looking at some other bills. Right off, this thing sent a message to me saying this proposed bill is another major step of more government intrusion into citizens' lives. Ms. Woods, the lady that's up here earlier, I didn't know she was going to say that, but she said it so well. I wish I could speak that well. I noted that in answering Senator Walworth's question, Ms. Broussard that was up here, he was asking about opting in instead of opting out. Well, she said, well, if we let them opt in, there wouldn't be enough people participating in the study. Why? Why do you think so? Well, I'd like to suggest to you that I myself as a parent and a grandparent, I wouldn't let my children participate in this. And it really scares me in this opting out because how do parents know that this survey is even going to be done? So many times the parents have to go and figure it out, and we can't, and we couldn't, and it's ridiculous. So I would that's just a red flag to me. And I just see this as being money, money, money. It's just another way to get more grants. Gentlemen and lady senator, grants isn't free money. That's our hard-worked money. We worked all of our lives to support our children and to raise our children for a better community. And it's bizarre that you are asked, and I know it's not your fault, but you're asked on an almost daily basis constantly to let's go for more grant money, let's do this. We have so many more priorities in our community and in our state. And I just felt very strongly in saying that I'm opposed to this. I would really ask you to think twice and reach down into your hearts. Everyone has spoken so eloquently that spoke before me, and I just really thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Ms. Robert, I apologize.
That's
I'm
okay.
from Southwest Louisiana. I should have known.
It's spelled Robert.
Dr. Hall.
Thank you very much, Senator. I am Dr. Will Hall, and I do represent Louisiana Baptist Office of Public Policy. Now, unlike the student who represents all students in Louisiana, I don't know that I represent every single opinion of the 550,000 Louisiana Baptists, but I do represent the consensus of opinions of our 550,000 Louisiana Baptists. And I am a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. I have a bachelor's in engineering in Soviet studies. I'm a graduate of the George Washington University with a degree in education and human development. I have a master's degree from Harvard University, also in education, and then I have my research dissertation from Vanderbilt University in leadership policy and organizations, and I am well versed in research. And I had a different presentation to make today, but having listened to everyone, I'd like to address a few issues that might, I think, clear the water on a couple things. One, Senator Appel, is it Appel or Apple? I apologize. I'm a West Virginian that has lived out of the state and now adapting to Louisiana, so I don't know what I hear anymore. So, but you're correct that the access to pornography on our personal devices is incredible, and 1 out of 3 10-year-olds now regularly accesses hardcore pornography. Half of 12 to 15-year-olds regularly access hardcore pornography, and it is an epidemic. But I will tell you that there are people that are doing things to correct that. And in fact, David Cameron, who is the Prime Minister in England, United Kingdom, has declared war on pornography in terms of protecting childhood from the corrosive impacts. And they've enacted some common sense legislation that they think is going to cause a great decrease on that, putting the burden on the internet service providers as well as those who sell the devices. And so we're going to look and monitor that data and see what happens in terms of protecting children from that. And I think Representative Carmody brought up the issue about fatherless homes and about the fact that he was raised in a good home with 2 parents, and there are children that don't have that same benefit. And I would say this, that on both the issues on internet pornography and its impact on children and also on fatherless homes, we hope to introduce at least resolutions on those 2 matters this year in the legislature that we hope will be a foundation for legislation next year to address that, where we're protecting children from pornography on the internet and other public sources, and also doing things to help fathers become better fathers and to engage them in the lives of their children so that they have the benefit of that. So that will be forthcoming from us. And India has also addressed the internet issue, but they've taken it beyond just childhood to address it across all spectrums. So regarding the statement that Representative Carmody read from the Education Department regarding that they do not have any data on programs that help children regarding avoiding high-risk sexual behavior. There actually are. I wasn't prepared. I do have that. I have data on that research, but I can tell you one that is that most Southern Baptists know about, and that is True Love Waits, and we do have national data on that, and it shows the delay of engaging in sexual behavior by children for about 18 months. It has that big an impact. Typically, we're seeing that the onset of sexual behavior among teens is around 14, 15, and we see that being delayed to 17, almost 18. So there's a little bit of sliding there. I don't have the exact data, but it's a little more than 18 months, and I'll provide that to you so that there are programs out there that are effective in at least delaying the onset of sexual behavior. And then there are other programs that likewise have been very effective in not just delaying sexual behavior, but also preventing risky sexual behavior, which I think Representative Smith is trying to address here regarding the contraction of sexual diseases. One of the things that Representative Smith did not share with you is the actual data that we have. We've talked about rates, and you had someone talking about the per capita, that we're number 1 in per capita. We have a wealth of data. Some of the data that wasn't shared is we actually know the names of and I'm just talking about 13 and 19-year-olds. I'm not talking about those that are older than that. We actually have the names and the addresses of the 40, 13 to 19-year-old teens who contracted syphilis last year, and their names and address. We have the names and addresses of the 67 teens who contracted HIV in the state of Louisiana last year. We have the names and the addresses of the teens that contracted chlamydia and gonorrhea. And so when you're proposing to do a survey of, let's just say 250,000 students over here, and you know those that have actually contracted sexually transmitted diseases over here, 12,590. We know the 12,590 teens that have contracted sexually transmitted diseases. If you're going to do a survey, there's no sense in fishing for information over here, and they've already told you that it's problematic with the data that they're going to connect because it is supposedly voluntary. People can opt in and out of it, so that really hurts in terms of research, the randomization and the quality of the research that you're going to get back. Here, on the other hand, you actually know the individuals who have contracted sexually transmitted diseases, and they have to be surveyed by our public health officials. That's why we have their names and addresses, because it's part of the surveillance, the public health surveillance system. If you're going to ask a survey, why are you asking a survey of 250,000 people when you can get the actual data on people who we know have that behavior here, and develop programs for intervention based on the information you learn on actual behavior? You don't have to guess, you know. And so if you're going to conduct a survey, it's unnecessary and it's actually going to be ineffective. One of the things that one of the ladies that sat on either side of Representative Smith said, that it's completely anonymous. It's completely anonymous about the student. It's completely anonymous about the school system and such. Well, that's going to be hard for you. It's going to be hard for us then to get the interventions to the people that need it. If you're actually masking the data that you're getting from individuals, and then you're going to come back and say, well, I got to help this person, you don't know who to help. Over here, on the other hand, you already have the data, the names of those people that have sexually transmitted diseases, and you can learn something about their behavior from which you can build a program, and you can actually implement interventions in those populations. And so it doesn't make sense, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to go fishing over here among 250,000 13 to 19-year-olds, and Senator Walsworth, you're exactly correct. There is a huge difference between a 13-year-old and a 19-year-old. And there's a huge difference between a 19-year-old and a 24-year-old. Everything from brain development, there are 3 phases of brain development in a person's life. For an adult male, the brain development doesn't really stop until about age 25, but for those of you who know about brains, it is the one organ that actually is changed, physically changed by talking to it. You know, you and I having this conversation right now are actually changing the structure of brains. I hope you think that's a benefit because I'm talking right now. Well, I don't know, and I'll let you judge that, okay? But when we're talking about doing aggressive programming, and you want to get good data, it just doesn't make sense to be surveying over here thinking you may randomly catch people that are going to give you good data that you can base policy on, when you actually have this population of people that you already know. I mean, they've already contracted a sexually transmitted disease. They've either have syphilis or HIV or chlamydia or gonorrhea, and you can survey them and get much better data. And by the way, you can still apply for grants and get the money that they're looking for the community groups by using this group over here, to get the data, than all public school students on this side of the ledger. So I would say this, that it's not truly an opt-out survey, because the parents will not see the actual questions to be able to know what they're opting in or opting out for. And while people say, well, it's available, they're not going to know. I mean, unless you write it in your legislation, say you will inform the parents that there are sex questions in the survey, and here are the 11 or 12 questions that are going to be asked. They don't know what they're opting in and opting out of. As far as influence, it is an intrusive survey in this regard. We do have data about teen behavior, and one of the things that we do know is that teens tell us, excuse me just for a minute, that 70% of teens anyway tell us that the biggest influence on their behavior, on their behavior regarding sexual behavior, is their parent. And so if we're going to be looking at programming that takes the parent out of the loop in terms of discussing that, it becomes problematic if the teens are telling us that the parent has the biggest influence on them in this regard. So at the least, if you want to have a solution, and you're saying that, well, there are parents that don't listen, there are parents, well, send the survey home to the parent to administer and force them to engage that discussion. But there are a lot of other better options for getting data and getting better data and for having better outcomes than doing a survey of 250,000 students when really you need to get the good data from the 12,590 students that you know are engaging in risky sexual behavior and who you know how to contact, and they've already been part of the surveillance system in our public health system. And with that, I'll close my remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. A question from Senator Appel.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm going to respectfully disagree with you on a few points.
Sure.
I appreciate your comments. They appeared well-founded, but I do disagree to great extent. Number one, I have never heard that teenagers, and I've just finished raising 2 of them, depend more on parental input in areas like sex and things of that nature versus peer group pressure and garbage that's on these devices. I will have to.
I'll provide you the research. I believe it's done by Brad Wilcox at the University of Virginia, sir, or it might have been at UT Austin, but I do have the data, and I'll provide it to you.
I have watched teenagers for a while now, and
I raised 3.
They respond. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
3 boys.
Number 2, can we can agree that there? I guess how you all got personally identifiable information on people that contracted STDs is beyond my understanding, because that's illegal.
It's part of the public health system. So whenever a doctor treats a patient with a sexually transmitted disease, they actually have to do a background investigation to find out who they've had sex with in order to
That's published information?
No, I didn't say it's published information. I said the public health system has that information.
Well, how would you get it?
Well,
You
I would
said
have
you
to make
had
a,
it.
no, sir. I said we have it in terms of the state.
Oh, we?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
I misunderstood.
I'm sorry.
Because
I apologize.
I thought from your comments you were saying that you all had
No,
names, addresses, locations of all these people.
I have a large database, but I don't have that database. No.
Well, is it a fair extrapolation to say, let's just use your number, 12,500 roughly people that have contracted, and that's 12,500 youngsters?
13 to 19-year-olds. Okay. Although I think one of those databases actually includes a 10-year-old, if I remember the study correctly.
That's horrible. But,
right.
Here's my problem. If we've had a system in place in Louisiana for generations, decades, that teaches abstinence, it doesn't have we don't really have a program to teach these kids the good, the bad, and the ugly about all this stuff. We're hiding it. Yet my kids went to parochial schools and got all that. And they turned out pretty good. I think. Who knows? But I guess my point is, if we know that you got 12,500 kids that are getting these diseases, isn't that enough data to tell us that we're doing something wrong and we need to take a different approach? And maybe the approach is the approach with the Catholic Church and the other parochial systems. My kids went to an Episcopal school.
Sure.
And yeah, please, I'd love to hear your response.
Well, 2 things. I've only been in the state about 7 months, so I just learned that you pronounce Atchafalaya by pretending like you're sneezing, so Atchafalaya.
That's it. Perfect.
And I don't make comparisons between crawfish and crawdads anymore. I know that's a forbidden thing.
It is.
So, but as far as studies go, you have to be honestly very careful about when people use descriptions of comprehensive sex education and also abstinence-based education, because what people describe and what they actually implement are 2 different things. What I can do is I can provide this committee data and describe from them exactly what is implemented and contained in each program and tell you how to evaluate it. But I will tell you this, that if you don't teach any program of risk behavior change, then you're going to end up with problems. And I prefer certainly abstinence-based education. I've seen it work.
I understand.
And I think that what you're probably taught in parochial school is probably similar to what I'm talking about in terms of abstinence-based education.
No, I don't think so.
Well, abstinence-based education does not mean that you avoid tough issues, but you address them from a different perspective, and you add the moral-based.
Remember, what we have in public schools, we have 700,000 children. I don't know what
711,
percentage,
510, I think is what it is.
whatever
It's over
percentage is
711.
reaching that. But I mean, basically, and this guy was a coach, still is a coach, used to be a coach, and I know when I went to public school, it was the coach that taught, and you know, and I'm no offense to coaches, but I'm not exactly sure what training a coach has in these very, you know, technical biological areas and so forth. So clearly, if we've got 12,500 kids who, in the public schools, we're not doing something right. And I think that's the frustration you're hearing here.
And I agree with
And
you.
we need to be doing something dramatically different if we're going to save these generations of children from this type of stuff.
I totally agree with you, and Senator, and this is what I would say. This survey, you're talking about a couple of different issues, so I'd like to kind of parse this out.
I'm a field now.
So, you know, the survey's not going to do that if you're thinking that it's going to help you address directly the 12,590 children that we know are engaging in high-risk sexual behavior because they're contracting sexual
Well, that's only the ones
diseases.
that came down with
Well,
disease.
I understand.
So you might have.
But those are the ones you can have confidence in the data, as opposed to surveying 250,000 students over here where, and like they said, they've already talked about some of the restrictions that they're going to have. It's voluntary, you can opt out, you can opt in. Just in terms of a researcher and research 101, once you start messing with the randomization in terms of selection process, you have skewed the data where it's really not going to tell you a whole lot.
I think in simple terms, my point is if you have 12,500 have contracted the disease, you might have 10 times that many that are engaging in risky behavior.
I won't disagree with you on that.
That's a huge percentage of the kids at that age, you know, in that age gap you just defined.
But
So-
here's the great thing. You can actually get information about who's contracting sexually transmitted disease. You know that they're engaging in this high-risk behavior, so you can develop programs over the high-risk behavior. What are the causes for that? Because that's probably going to extrapolate
But we're not doing
to that
it.
other number.
The problem is we're not doing it. We're teaching something they call abstinence. The coaches are teaching it, maybe. I don't know if anybody's teaching anything in these schools.
That's what I would say, sir. I would question whether anybody's teaching anything rather than that. But again, that's apart from this survey, and that's something that we ought to address with our education
The idea of the survey, I think, is to
program.
start the process so that we can bring this to a higher level of significance than it is today. And I think that's why I'm in favor of the survey, because I want to see this thing moved up in priorities and get away from the idea that we're just going to depend on parents. It hasn't worked. I know it's the right thing. It hasn't worked.
If you want good statistical significance, then do your survey on the known 12,590. That's where you're going to get high
Yeah, but what about
quality
the other-
data.
If my number of 10 to 1 is right, what about the other 90% that we're missing?
Then you're going to be able to generalize this information much better than from a population of 250,000 that you're going to be hit and miss into that they've said.
Okay.
Your hit and miss here is basically what I'm saying. You know,
I understand.
Survey research really depends on on high quality methodology in terms of randomization selection. It's going to actually, you're going to sample the population that you're going to generalize to. Okay.
Well, I
Here
think-
you can do this in this 12,000. You really can generalize to the population of people that are engaging in high risk behavior. From this, you're not going to be able to do it from this.
Well,
And you're still going to be able to apply for funds
I hope
if you
that
do
we
it
can
this.
agree that of the extreme importance that some level of quality education, whether it be in your definition of abstinence or mine or whoever's, is something we need to push for in these schools, or we're just going to keep losing these kids. I mean, that's a simplistic response.
And I'll write myself a note, and I will give you some information on programs that we do know that work.
Thank you, sir.
If that'll be helpful.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Senator Hale. Mr. Paul.
Thank you. I enjoy it. Honestly, I feel at home here. I love the people. I love the culture here.
And we're glad to have you
Thank you.
back. Dr. Hall, just quickly from own information, when you talked about, you say there are 12,000 that we know about. Those are adults, or those are adults and children? They're just
13 to
children?
19-year-olds, 12,590.
Just- I didn't
13 to 19-year-olds, although I think one study included a 10-year-old. It was either a 10-year-old or 14-year-old, but it was an outlier.
Thank you. Senator Walsworth for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague to my left, you'll be the national campaign to prevent teen and unplanned pregnancy, which is where we get most of this information from, says teens say parents most influence their decisions about sex.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that incredible? second of all, you're absolutely right. Surveys can be manipulated on who you're asking to take them. That's why they don't want to opt in. They want to opt out because they know. And she said more people will take it if you have to opt out. But if you have to opt in, there'll be less people to talk. You would think that would be fairer, but that's not sort of where we. But I mean, that's exactly what happens. So, that's factual. Is this other data is factual because it came. And it's not a survey.
Yes,
it
sir.
is a strict.
And once you corrupt the selection process,
That's right.
you corrupt the database, quite honestly.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Walsworth. Members, that clears the board. I have cards in opposition who do not wish to speak. Kathleen Benefield with the Louisiana Family Forum. Timke, and representing herself, Keith Chatelain, himself, Nona Chavalet, Ursula Anderson, Brenda O'Brock, Dennis Burke, Janet Jackson, and Christine McDonald, all who do not wish to speak but are in opposition to the bill. Members, I do have an amendment that I'd like to offer, and it's we had this bill, as you know, before, very similar from Senator Bishop, and we added this amendment to his bill. It's to tighten up some of the language, and it's being passed out to you now. It's 2895. It simply prohibits personally identifiable data from being collected and requires the data to be reported in the aggregate and held confidential, and more importantly, that it's not considered a public record. I think that tightens the bill up quite a bit, especially to some of those people at the desk who talked about personal information. It may not go as far as they wish, but I certainly think that it does a good job of protecting some of that personal information. Representative Smith, have you've seen the amendment?
I have, yes.
Do you have any objections or
No, I
questions to the amendment? Members, do you have any questions or objections or discussion on the amendment? I would offer that amendment without objection. Amendment 2895 is adopted. Members, the board is clear. Representative Smith, you may close on your bill.
Thank you, Senator Morris. I'd like to, before I do, clear up a couple of things. We followed the act that was put in place for the confidentiality of data, and this is not a required survey. It is a voluntary survey. It's been done in this state for years, as you can see, for various data, and all of it follows what we've passed in education for the state. Along with that, you read a law that says you can teach sex ed there. Yes, you can. There's not a school district that actually does it in that depth, for sure. We do have some pockets of abstinence that's being taught, but yet we don't have anything that's on a continuum for these kids to really be able to get information. I am very passionate about children, all children. The most important thing for me is that I don't want to see one child be harmed. And when we have the issue that we have right now, our children are being harmed. And in order for us to look at this as policymakers, we're supposed to be the adults in making the decisions on how to ensure that we don't harm them from the policy side. And by having no policy, we're continually to harm them. You know, folks say, well, you've got the data, make the policy. You don't want to teach sex ed in this state. You've already told me that over and over again. For the many times I've brought it forth. You don't want sex ed, but you ask the question of why are some of those other states reducing their populations in these STIs, STDs, and teen pregnancy? Look at their states and see whether or not they have sex ed. Majority of them do. Majority of them teach sexual education in their schools. So they're doing something about the issues that are affecting their children. Louisiana cannot continue to live with its head in the sand. Our children are hurting. You talk about 13-year-olds with STDs. What about 10-year-olds that we have that are having babies? You realize we have 10-year-olds in our state that have children? That's totally letting our children run rampant and not knowing how to help them and not preventing these things from happening. And we can do a better job of that as lawmakers by at least starting to get some information from high school students to be able to see whether or not these students can give us information to be able to set policy. We passed a law last year called dealing with Aaron's Law, dealing with child sexual abuse. Do you realize you all were so afraid of that word sexual, you took it out of the bill? That's egregious. You didn't want sex involved in it at all. You took sexual out of the bill. But yet, it's an issue that you have where children are being harmed. All we're doing is asking for information so that we will be able to direct some definite policy to help our children not be harmed in the state of Louisiana. And I ask you to allow the whole Senate to debate this bill by getting it out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Members, the board is clear. Senator Boudreaux? Senator Boudreaux?
Yes, I was going to move favorable on the Representative Smith's bill.
Senator Boudreaux moves favorable on House Bill 402 as amended. There is an objection. Ms. Heidenthal, will you call a roll? Members, if you support the bill, you will vote yes. If you're opposed, you vote no. Ms. Heidenthal.
Senator Milkovich? No. Senator Appel?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Boudreaux? Yes. Senator Mizell? No. Senator Walsworth? No. Senator White? No. 2 yes, 4 no.
Thank you, members. And
Thank you.
House Bill 402.
Thank you to those of you who really care about our children.
Thank you, Senator Smith. We appreciate your time here.